gotten a hold of our speaker. So we're working on that. So apologies to everyone concerned. I know this is an issue you're very concerned about. So I'm hoping that we'll start very soon. Okay, ma'am, there's no. Okay, there's no public comment. Okay, ma'am, you're out of order. Please sit down.
This meeting is being recorded and summarized.
Okay, welcome everyone. Council is convened for a couple of work sessions. We've had some technical difficulties and we don't yet have our speaker that we had scheduled for the first work session. So we're going to move forward with the second work session, which is Clark County Event Center and at the Fairgrounds Master Plan. So welcome and please get started.
Good morning, counselors. Michelle Schuster, Director of Internal Services. And with me today, I have John Morrison, who's the CEO and Fair Manager, Amy DeShazer, who is the Managing Director of Events at the Fairgrounds, Brian Luce, who's the Director of Operations, and he's out in the audience, and then Chip Overton, who is the architect who did the actual master planning with us, and he is actually online, and he'll be joining us in a second to present the first slides. And then just a little bit of information before he jumps in. So back in 2021, we went out to an RFP to obtain an architectural firm to help us with the master plan for the fairgrounds. It was supposed to take about a year, but because of COVID and the delays of having to put off one of our fairs, we did have to extend this out so that we could have an actual fair be seen by the architectural board and get information from the public and our stakeholders. And so the report was finally issued in September of 2023, and that's what we'll be discussing today is the master plan report. And this is the third master plan that has been done over the many years for the fairgrounds. We have had to move on and do new ones because things change. And so as I said, this is the third one. And now I'm going to pass it over to Chip Overton, who's the principal with Kiefer Overton Architects, and they helped us do this plan. Chip?
Hello. John, I might actually have you start out and just kind of give a background real quick, and then I can kind of dive into the details of the planning process.
There we go. As Chip, excuse me, as Michelle mentioned, this is a third master plan. It is following one that came about 20 years old, and we had a decision whether we wanted to continue to pursue that by doing some of the projects or look at a plan that was probably more relevant to what's happening not only at their fairgrounds, but around that area with the development. As a matter of fact, in that existing plan, over those 20 years, only 2 projects were completed. The big exhibit hall, which you're all familiar with, and then the addition of some ticket booths that would serve each of the 3 sections of that hall. So at the end of that process, there was still over $39 million worth of projects that were embedded in that plan. Uh, and as we looked at it, we said it's really not relevant to what's happening, as I say, at the fair and in the community. A good example was that plan initially had a 40,000 square foot animal facility in it that would have combined all the species in one area. And over the years, the increase in animal health concerns and requirements to separate species meant that we had to modify that and get different buildings. Uh, that made a considerable change in the amount of space that's required to do that. Once you put up a lot of buildings instead of one, you've got building separation, you've got roads, et cetera. So an awful lot of things argued for do a new plan. And that's where we started. Uh, and as Michelle mentioned, it was an RFP that resulted in what Chip's going to talk to you about today.
Thanks, John.
Yes.
So, as we look at where we started with this plan, it was really a process that involved not only looking at the existing facilities, but also looking at the surrounding market conditions. So we kicked off the process looking at taking a tour of the site, walking through each individual building, and then as we took notes, we also had a partner named Crossroads Consulting, who specializes in fairground facilities, and they looked at what the surrounding market may bring, meaning looking at comparable and competitive facilities, as well as looking at gaps in the marketplace where we might be able to take advantage of, or maybe even leverage some additional revenues. After we went through that process of analysis, both Crossroads and KO ourselves looking at facilities, we ended up interviewing several stakeholders. And as a result of those stakeholder interviews, it really helped us start to develop a framework, if you will, that we can start to build around. Understanding what was important to folks that use the site on a day in, day out basis, as well as then comparing it to what the market would bear. And that really helped that really helped to start create the groundwork with which this master plan was developed. From that process, we really started to look at the plan and started to look at what elements needed to be created in that plan. We really wanted to have a plan that was achievable, something that could be developed over the next 10 plus years, not something that necessarily we were going to try to develop on day one. And quite honestly, we've had discussion, John, myself, and his staff. This plan really is something that helps not only tell you what to do, but it really tells you what not to do. Meaning, it helps us make sure any decision we make, we're not going to put a new building or a new structure in the wrong place, or new infrastructure. We don't want to build something that we have to tear out in the near future. So bottom line, we want to create a very flexible, multi-use, first-class facility that can continue to have the fair, as well as look at other avenues and explore other avenues of revenue. As we went through this process, we took an approach of really taking a look at what the bones of what we had were. We wanted to make sure that we addressed any deferred maintenance items. We wanted to make sure that we expanded the infrastructure, office, back of house areas, the areas that supported the events and the facilities that we have today, and then look forward to developing what we have or what we could have from a market perspective. So that came down to looking at additional parking, improving circulation, looking at enhancing existing infrastructures, as well as just general modernization. The master plan itself, this is a kind of an all-in look at where the master plan ended up. North is up on this particular page. The large white box, kind of right of center, is the existing expo hall that you have now. And then as we start to look at developing parking and ingress and egress roads around the site, you can kind of dive in and see those elements as well. So as I alluded to on the previous slide, our priorities really were to fix, add parking, enhance circulation. But while we did that, we really wanted to make sure that the face or the entrance, the character of the grounds was improved, as well as just multi-purpose flexible use of the grounds. So any building we put into place, we want to make sure is something that is not only long-term viable, usable, but also something that can be used for any number of events, whether it's a sporting event for your local high school, whether it's a trade show, or possibly even an event like the fair or a farmer's market or something similar. Other things that relate to that flow would be wayfinding, finding your way around the site, and just making sure that the quality and quantity of food and beverage offerings on the site works with the patron load that we're looking at adding. Additional priorities revolved around making sure that not only did we have continued site improvement, but we wanted to make sure that we continued to look at the economic conditions of the site. And one of the ways of doing that and making sure that the programs that we were looking at adding improved not only revenues but use, we're looking back at that market study. The market study actually started to tell us that the fair was actually the first and foremost leading revenue driver on the site. But there is opportunity for other small animal shows, dog shows, as well as medium-sized business-type trade shows. And we also see different club and high school use as well. So I think there's a real kind of regional reach that the event center can have, and we want to continue to maintain that reach. The way we can do that is through enhancement and working through creating the facilities that we have. And through that, we've created a phased process. That phased process is really looking right now, is actually already started to be implemented as we add on to the expo building and add offices. We're going to eventually remove the old offices, build new offices, which then, of course, it creates an entire domino effect of other areas of the fairgrounds where we need to look at removing old infrastructure and rebuilding new infrastructure. But all of those wheels are in motion now, and we're starting onto that phase one.
So
And
the next,
yeah, thank you.
thank you, Chip. So the next couple of slides we're going to be going through is looking at all the projects that are sort of on the new master plan we've created at a high level. So if you can go to the next slide. So this first slide, you'll see these are things that need to be demoed on the property to make room for new facilities or remodeling of existing facilities, and also buildings that need to be renovated. So such things as demoing the food court, the horse stalls, the maintenance building, and then renovating things such as the exhibit hall, the south halls, the sheep barn, the bee barn. And on here, there's about $500,000 of demolition projects and about $21 million worth of renovation projects. And just a disclaimer about the figures you're seeing here. These were developed during the master plan phase 22-23, and we do know that due to inflation, tariffs, market conditions, salary and benefits, L&I, taxes, that these are on the low end now. And so we will, once we bring these projects forward to you over the next 20 years, we will make sure that they are adjusted properly for the market. So just a little disclaimer there. So one of the things the previous plans did not do well, as John talked about, was thinking of future changes. And so one of the things that was important with us doing this master plan was making sure that the buildings we do design are multi-use, multifunctional, and don't limit us should there be changes like John talked about with animals in the future of not having them combined into one building. So it's going to give us more flexibility. We didn't want to limit ourselves like previous master plans. Next page, please. This next page sort of shows things in the master plan that are new facilities and core improvements. And so these are things such as the Fairgrounds Management Office being added, a new covered pavilion that'll act as the food court area, new maintenance building, new ticket booths, and then core improvements are upgrading the actual site and some of the site work that's out there, such as the wastewater pump station, the stormwater facilities. Of the new facilities, there's about $44 million called out new facilities. And then for the facility core improvements, there's about $12 million called out here. Next slide, please. And then the next slide sort of goes over some of the parking and roadway improvements that were called out in the master plan. In the parking area, it does show that there's approximately $77 million of parking structures. And we do realize with the money we have available, that's probably not going to be feasible, but we did have them call out all possibilities in this master plan. And on here for the parking, there's about 87 million total projects, and for roadway improvements, about 2.4 million of projects. So in total, what you're seeing on these three slides is about $170 million worth of possible projects for us to accomplish. And just so you know how that relates to our funding, so we have Fund 1026, which is the Exhibit Hall Fund, which is dedicated revenue to be used only on this site. There's currently just over $19 million in that fund, and we have the ability to collect through the tax base that this is based on another approximately $64 million through 2042. This revenue is not only used on project stuff, but it also is our major maintenance and capital for renovations, in addition to the ones you see here for the fairgrounds. And it also supplies the fairgrounds with about $600,000 per year to do their normal operation and maintenance at the fairs, such as small patches, purchasing different equipment that's needed for the fair, just to run the operations out there and the facility operations. So overall, if you take that 600,000 we're committed to providing them, that leaves us about $70 million in this bucket once we collect all the revenue to use towards projects on this master plan or major maintenance that needs to be accomplished over the next 20 years at the fairgrounds. And then we do have another fund, which is Fund 1003, and that is just our operational fund for the fairgrounds. And that currently, because of all the good years they've had recently at the fair, currently is sitting at about just under $2 million of fund balance that can also go towards maintenance type items or purchases if need be. Next slide, please. So the next slide, we're going to move into looking at some of the current projects that are happening out there. Some of these are on the master plan and others are just things that we have been planning along through the years. Next slide. So currently we are in the process of working with an engineering firm to design new parking lots for our parking lot A. Those bids are going to go out in the fall of 2025 and we'll cover the parking lot A. And that project is estimated to be about $4.5 million. And the council has already approved that project and committed the funding to it from the Fund 1026. We are also working on the E-Barn roof repairs, A&E for the administration building, which is part of the master plan. Also the parking and the administration building are both called out on the master plan. And then we'll be coming back to you next year for the actual construction dollars for the administration building. Lighting upgrades are also being worked at. And then some of the things that we've done the last couple of years is updating the orange, blue, green, and yellow ticket booths, the purple gate, replacing the sheep barn and the South Hall roof, tree removals by the horse stalls, carpet in the entryway of the expo hall, purchasing a hook truck, purchasing a water truck, and locks on the horse arenas. So we've been busy out there completing projects that have been approved by the council. Next slide, please. This next slide just sort of shows some pictures of existing parking lot A that we're in the design phase for, and this will be improved greatly once that project is done. We're hoping for construction in October as long as weather holds. This one does have to be staged around all the events out there. Next slide, please. And this sort of slide goes over some of the repairs and equipment that we have been doing this year. And this includes the B-Barn remodel, some network switches at the grandstands, grandstand speakers and crow's nest electrical, a new public address system on the grounds, asphalt repairs around the interior of the fairgrounds. So this would be sort of the concourse through the different buildings when we talk about the asphalt repairs. The exhibit floor is being refinished. And then, like I said, we've purchased some new vehicles for them this year, including the water truck, the hook truck, and a utility terrain vehicle. And then the next slide just shows some pictures of the types of projects that I just called out that we're working on there for them. And then some of the conditions of the e-roof. Yeah, the conditions of the e-roof of why we're repairing it. And now we're going to talk about some future projects that will be coming back to council for in future budgets. And so for 2026, we will be coming back to the council with asks for the B-Barn network switches, asphalt repairs, livestock pen replacement, horse arena and stall bar lighting replacement, replacing the event center gutters. The Washington State Clean Building Act does affect this building to the tune of about $2.3 million of utility upgrades we're going to have to make due to the building to make it more energy efficient. And then some equipment we'll be purchasing, such as utility trailers, livestock pens, tractors, and a golf cart or additional 3 golf carts and utility vehicles. And then our big project for next year, as I've mentioned, is we're in the design phase right now, and we'll actually be coming back to you in just a couple weeks for the architectural and engineering for this building. So you'll see that at a council meeting soon. And then next year, we hope to actually start the construction for the administration office. And so building E is the current exhibit hall, and where the D is where they have some admin offices now, which is too small for their needs. And there was always an additional phase called out even in the prior master plan to expand into the area that's shown as B on this map. And so, that will be sort of a big project for next year. And then additional projects that will be done, we're hoping to start next year, is building a new maintenance shop. That is not shown on the clip in front of you. It's outside that area. Demolishing the old admin building and restroom, which is JJ on the map. Demolishing the maintenance shop. Building a new covered rental pavilion with restrooms, which will serve as what is currently sort of our food court area. This will become part of our food. And then demolishing the food court cover. And we sort of have to do them in this order because there is a trickle effect, because we need to build the new main shop before we can tear down the existing one. We need to build a new food court before we can tear down the existing one. So this sort of goes in the order we're planning on completing some of these master plan projects. And then this next slide sort of shows you the estimate cost. And as I said, these are rates from 22 and 23. So we know that these are on the low side. So the admin office, we're projected to be spending about $2.7 million plus architectural engineering. The new maintenance shop is estimated at $2.1 million. The demo of the restrooms in the old admin building is $65,000. The demo of the maintenance shop approximately $25,000. The new rental pavilion is at just under $6 million, and the demoing of the food court is just under $100,000. So these are the first projects we'll be coming back to you that we're looking at doing off this master plan. And that finishes our actual presentation to you. Next slide. And so do you have any questions?
Thank you very much. So counselors, any questions? Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm just trying to get a grasp of the money needed for this. So it sounds like there's $170 million of total projected
Mhm.
possible projects, and we have the ability to collect through 2042 up to 70 million of that. And is some of that new taxes, or is that existing revenue that's expected to come in?
It's existing revenue that's expected to come in. This is, a lot of this is based off a hotel, motel sales tax branch that is already funded. Yeah, that's already coming in. Currently in the fund balance, we have just over 19 million existing, and then there will be at approximately 63 million of additional based on current projections that'll come in through that 2042. And so we do know, just like prior master plans, we'll never have all the funding to do all the plans on here. And so that's why we will have to prioritize and figure out what makes the most sense to be done out there, what will bring the public to the site, what will make the money to support those. And so we will, evaluate everything that's in this master plan and bring forward things that do make sense to do. And we do realize, like the parking structures, we realize that's $77 million. There is at this time parking on the site. We do need to improve the parking lots, but we don't see the need to probably put in the actual parking structures out there. And so stuff like that. There's also a call in this master plan, possibly buying property around should it ever become available. We do know that the footprint of this will probably never grow. And so that's money we wouldn't have to spend. That's on the master plan also. So
Thank you. And is new potential revenue calculated in these estimates
as
of
far
costs to offset some of the costs?
So basically we have the revenue base, and that's all we have to work with at this point is the current revenue base and the base we know we'll be collecting over the years. And so
Okay.
that's why we know we won't be able to accomplish everything. We're not going to be able to do 200 million projects where the max revenue we'll have is $80 million. So
Right, but the possibilities of trade shows and dog shows and high school activities, were those calculated in the
So
projected revenue?
So those just basically fund the Fund 103, which is our operational fund, the staffing out there, the ongoing daily costs. So our rates don't typically cover the construction cost. That's funded from the other one. So no, the
Okay,
rates
thank
would
you.
not cover these.
Other questions from council? Go ahead.
Yeah, I got a few of them here. Um, so I have a question real quick, and traffic is a major issue. And this is a plan looking pretty far into the future, and I'm for the most part I've just kind of heard about ways of kind of doing little ways of mitigating that traffic. But have we looked at any really creative ways that we all know will cost money, but that we could potentially lobby the state for looking for grants and things like that to maybe make a fundamental change in the traffic pattern out there to alleviate that stress and to accommodate for the growth that we know that's going to be coming in?
Not that I'm aware of, John.
I don't think there's a formal process going. Gee, I don't think there's a formal process going that way, but you're exactly correct. We're kind of a facility that has one way in, one way out. We're limited by that. Excuse me. We're limited somewhat by the agreement with the amphitheater of what number of parking spots they need to have, what's involved in that, and of course the 6 months that they operate the parking lots as opposed to the 6 months that I do. It is something we really ought to look at because any of you who have been out there know it's, like I say, it's one way in and one way out, just about. We've got some ideas this year on how to empty the fairgrounds at the busiest time down to the south and out now that 10th Avenue's been done. But we look at it every event to say, how are we going to manage this? And I totally agree. We ought to have an ongoing process with WashDOT. I think coming up, the construction of the roundabouts is going to be something that will impact things significantly out there.
Great, thank you. And I would suggest also maybe working with our community planning department and You know, just because when I'm looking at like a 20-year plan, I mean, this is something that has to be done. We can't continue to limp like we are with that traffic. So I think that even though we may not have an identified source of funding for it, it still needs to be planned for so that we can look for that funding potentially.
And while it's not directly in and out, that John had mentioned, we have the corridor there that WashDOT is looking at for 179th. That needs to have all the updates. So hopefully that will also alleviate, because if anybody drives up I-5 on an event day, you're backed up on I-5 as well. So hopefully the state will continue moving forward with that funding.
Counselor Young, I will mention that Steve Gallup, I know that Michelle, when we talked about the master plan, they're going to start interfacing. We interface with Empathy. I know John talks to Public Works as well for the road, but we will be involved in some of that conversation as we look forward to the roundabouts, as John mentioned, and all of the 10th being open does alleviate that, but we'll have to keep planning on every phase of 179th and the impacts that that's going to cause.
Okay, and then one question I had kind of related to that, and I will assume I'll get an answer later, but I was curious whether the event center in this plan is considered as part of the comp plan update, but I can get that answer later.
Yeah, we do have to update the comp plan in the facility section so that we can use the money towards these projects. So we do have to update, I think it's section F.
It's the capital facilities plan.
Yeah.
And then I was curious if is there a way, it may not be possible, but is there a way that we can update the plan just with more realistic numbers now instead of like kind of piecemeal finding out what they're going to be in the future as the funding is requested?
I mean, it's hard to say over the next 20 years what will
Right.
happen. We could update them today and next year something changes
Something different,
again,
yeah.
and we'd have to look at updating them again.
Okay.
So
it's tough
yeah.
to plan with
Yeah.
inflation.
And I think it's important also to note, as council, if you recall, you approved some of the funding for this year during the budget process. So during the annual budget process is a great tool to actually reevaluate what's on the plan, what makes sense, what changes, and then we'll communicate that through the process for council's direction.
And I was also wondering, just kind of a little bit in addition to Councilor Little's comment, have we looked at any other potential sources of revenue? Have you extinguished all opportunities? Is there something that could be created, something added to where we might be able to move through with the plan a little bit quicker?
I mean, one of the things we can do is we can take basically a loan out on the money that'll be collected over the next 20 years, and then it's equitably, paid back by the taxes that are collected over the time. So we have had some conversations with the treasurer's office about that already, of if we do want to move forward with quite a few and there's enough to lump together that we can fund it that way. But we still have to have that revenue stream to be able to pay that back, which at this point is limited. We also know that we don't want to basically outmarket ourselves by John charging too much for an event and then they're going to go to a different event facility in the area. So each year they reevaluate their rates and they present those rates to the county, and that's how they bill the rates for that year. So there's definitely each year he can reevaluate to see if he can bring in more revenue for certain events of charging a different amount. But we also know we don't want to market ourselves out of the business and then we don't have enough to support their normal operation.
Yeah, it is a fine balance. I would say
Yeah.
if there is a way with looking at using the revenue as a source for a loan, I would certainly be supportive of that.
And if I could
You
just
know,
add, I was just going to add one thing too. I want to make sure that we have the capacity to actually do the work, because sometimes we have great plans that we want to have all this done next year, but we don't have the staffing, and then we have to contract out and all that stuff. It actually end up costing more. So we want to not put us in over our heads. Go ahead, John. Sorry.
now you can say that one of the things that Chip and I have talked about repeatedly is the value that being able to design these facilities as we go brings to the table. We have got to have multi-use facilities. I don't think the county can afford to spend money on a building that's used 10 days out of the year. And this plan has got the ability, as we design each of these things that we build, to say this can be used for the fair, but it also can be rented for this. And so, in other words, get more capacity with what I'm doing with the grounds and the parking I've got rather than trying to find more real estate or anything like that. So you will probably see a lot of design work as we move forward. Most of these things say remodel, and that means let's look at it and how do we make it something that's not August 1 through 10 only.
Great. Just a couple more real quick. Apologize. The 600,000 that comes from the county, is that from the general fund?
No, that's from the Fund 1026,
Okay.
which is the fund collecting the
Okay.
special revenue
Great.
source.
That,
Yeah.
thank you for that clarification. And then go
It
ahead.
did in the past, 500,000 of it in the past did come from the general fund, but we were able to offset that as this fund has built revenue.
Great.
So,
Okay. Clean Building Act.
mhm.
So 2.3 million, I think you said, is that to existing structures or is that increases to the cost of the new structures that
Yeah.
we're looking at building?
So it's only to the existing structure. It's the exhibit hall. The exhibit hall is over 50,000 square feet, and so it is required to be brought up to the proper EUL that the state has mandated. And so the things that'll bring it up is adding additional solar panels on the roof, changing out some chillers, the controller system, breaking it off, because right now the whole fairground site is on about 2 meters. And so we need to break that off on a meter of its own, because right now, even with all the improvements we could do to the building, without breaking off the meter, we can never get to the EUL standard they have. So we need to show that building as a standalone building. So we've got to meter it separately. Lighting upgrades to the building will also be done to upgrade all the lighting to LED lighting. So lots of improvements in that $2.3 million number to bring us up to what the state's going to require.
Great, thank you. And then my last question, actually two more, apologize. Have we, there's a lot of demolition taking place. Have we worked with the Historical Preservation Commission at all, looking at the buildings to see if there's anything of value in them to consider?
Most of them are pole barn structures, and so most of the stuff that maybe the old equipment and stuff is not part of the actual building. But we do have to, every time we do a permit or get really a lot of the funding that John gets from the state, we have to do an archaeological review. And so that was even part of the thing for the parking lots out there, is that we had to have an archaeological study done on the site to make sure that we weren't going to be disturbing anything in the ground that could have archaeological significance. And so it's definitely part of the whole construction process as we go through things. So
Okay, yeah, and I would encourage participation with them because they can point things out that most of us don't recognize that may have historical value. And then the last question, this could be another one that probably is not answerable at this point, but there was a mention of needed hotels, additional hotel space. And what I'm wondering is if we could have community planning look at maybe, as part of the comp plan update, do we have the zoning, proper zoning in place for that in the future? But that we don't have to discuss at this point. So I appreciate your work. It's thorough. It's I appreciate your dedication to this because this is something that's going to take a long time to build out, and I'm fairly certain that I won't be sitting here when all of this gets done. So I appreciate your dedication, even though a lot of that work that you do, you just don't see for a very long time, and potentially not while you're a part of it even. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I have a few questions. Thanks for asking some of the ones that I had in mind, so I appreciate that. Related to the O&M, that 600,000, has that remained fairly flat, the annual expenses? And I'm just wondering if that has been adequate to really maintain the buildings.
So we were at about 500,000 for a good probably 15 years plus. And then I believe it was about 2 or 3 years ago, we raised to 625 because we were finding that with the cost of products and what we need to do out there, the 500,000 was not enough. So we did raise it fairly recently. So we're hoping that sticks for a little while at least. But yes, there's a possibility as things get more expensive, we may have to look at either dipping a little bit farther into that or using some of their existing fund balances in the 103. As I said, there's 2 million there, or raising rates to account for market adjustments also, because anything that's not covered by that is covered by their normal rental rates.
Right. I'd appreciate keeping us advised on the adequacy of that O&M, that annual O&M, because what I've seen is often, budgets get tight maintenance gets deferred, it gets more costly down the road. So keep us advised on that. And I'm wondering also about the timing related to the parking lot and the food court. And I imagine this is going to be difficult to juggle the events that you have going on with those sort of things. And my primary, I usually go to the county fair a few times when it's going. It's those 10 days that I'm interacting mostly. So I'm wondering how you're balancing all of that, or if there be some periods when things just close down because there's no other way to do it.
Yeah. Well, and like with the parking lot, that's what we said is we really couldn't be demoing the parking lots during the fair or the big concert season for the amphitheater. And so that's why we're hoping weather holds and we can do it in October, because that's when the weather still can be good enough to lay the pavement down. And so that's why we've got it going out on the street very soon, and then the construction window, because that really works well where, yes, there are events happening on October, but we can use some of the other parking lots, because this is just parking lot A for the $4.5 million. Then we'll have to start looking at additional parking lots after that. But we are working on coordination to make sure it's impacting the least we can do for the construction window. And then, yes, for the food court, we do want to make sure that demo and construction of the food court is not happening in the middle of the fair, that we're doing it before or after a given year. So yeah, everything will have to be looked at of when's the best time to complete those, that we can get construction crews on site and not impact events. But there may be times where they won't be able to hold an event that maybe has been held at a certain time in the past. So.
Okay. Did you want to add something?
I was just going to say exactly almost the same thing, that we're already working with our fall events that we have contracted, and we have let them know that if construction is taking place, we will be using parking lot B, which is just right across the road, and we have routes planned for pedestrians, and so we're already making plans for all of those issues that we'll address.
Yeah, that's a challenging thing. And I'm just curious, I hear sometimes from people about accessibility related to the parking lot. We have an accessibility committee, and so I would encourage you to check in with them. They may have some good input related to that. And what is the timing for the food court specifically, are you thinking?
Go ahead, Bill.
The existing food court will probably happen after we get that building that you saw there called Building C, because that will function as a food court. And I can't afford to take that existing food court down until that's done. That C can't be done until we get the expansion of the admin building, which then will allow us to bring old admin and maintenance down. So it's a phased project that the food court's kind of on that far end of it, the existing food court.
And does any of the vendors, do they have to like supply exhaust fans, or are there costs to the vendors that maybe with the remodel could be alleviated?
We're actually
Go ahead.
we're actually looking at a whole different concept than our current food court, because right now that is how the current food court is these individual little areas in the food court that are rented out, and the exhaust fans has to be kept up to standards and stuff like that. And the concept we're looking at is something that will allow us to use that space not just for one vendor, where basically that area is held off and now it can't be used for something else. It'd be more like a food court or a food truck concept, where people would be able to pull their stuff in, hook it to the power, the gas line, the water lines, the sewer lines, but not have to have something that's so permanently fixed that's only being used 10 days of the year. And then I believe, John, you're also interested in having sort of a prep area that could be used for different events too.
Yes. I think the concept is going to move toward more of a mobile food operation during the fair. If you look at what we're doing now, there are 46 different food things you can do out there, and only 16 of them are in that building. So the idea of people coming out, setting up for the fair, and then leaving is not going to be a foreign idea. It will be to the folks that are in that building right now, because they've got the year-round presence and the ability to do more types of things in there. But I'm going to try to get it a little bit more where when the fair's over, it's kind of a clean slate, a building that has food court capability in it that can be rented out year round. But to answer your question, those costs of maintaining that food establishment in there, as far as the hoods, the things that are required by code, would fall to us rather than the occupant.
Thank you. And then just a note on traffic. I think it's the amphitheater that really has been problematic. I think there might have been 2 months a couple years ago when things were running well, but over the history of that amphitheater, not so good, and there's still chronic problems. And they do have a conditional use permit, which would be good to take a look at that because folks aren't allowed to turn down 10th, and it's difficult. So thank you very much. This is hard work, and I can see you're all passionate about it. I appreciate that. So just keep us up to date. Thank you.
See you in August.
See you in August. Yep. Anything else from anyone? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So do we do a
This
new
meeting is
recording?
being recorded and summarized.
Okay, so we're opening up for our second work session. This was on Pacificorp's proposed power line. There's a lot of people in the room, and I believe we have John Aniolo online from Pacificorp. Just before we get started, just a reminder to folks that this is a work session. It's informational. We're not making any decisions today. What decisions we may make in the future related to this, it's unclear what may or may not even come back to the council. But because there was so much concern in the community, the council thought it was important to have some questions answered, get overview of what is being considered. So it's a long process that may already have been underway for quite a while. But with that, John, are you there? Okay, he's been requested to unmute.
Can you guys hear me?
Hi, John. Yeah, this is Chair
Okay.
Marshall. Welcome. We appreciate you. Sorry, very sorry for the delay earlier on, had some technical difficulties. We have a room full of folks here that, and I know we passed along to you a lot of questions that people have raised to us. So I'll just turn it over to you, and then we'll have some, if you have a presentation, we can ask some questions along the way and maybe following.
I don't have an official presentation. I have a KMZ map that shows the route that I was hoping you guys could display.
Yes,
And
that
then
is on
also
display.
okay, if you want to scroll that to the northernmost end of the line, what you're looking at up there is the northmost terminal point of the new line. That's our Swift substation up on the Merwin Dam facility. So that's where the line will start. It's going to connect in at 230. And then as you scroll south, you will follow the 230 line to the point where our new substation will be built. That's where the line will turn due west. At that point, a substation will be built that's 230 to 115 conversion. The line that goes from there west around the city of Camas is a 115 kV line that will run around the city of Camas and eventually go back east and then jump across the river on an existing set of idle structures that we have and connect in at our Troutdale substation at the most southern end. if you can scroll down to that. That would be the entire length of the line as we currently have it planned. There's another PDF file I sent you that shows 3 substation locations that we were originally looking at. So if you want to show those, you can. So this project has been started on and off several times over the years. Those substations were originally considered, or those substation locations were originally considered several years ago. They may not be viable locations at this time, but I just wanted to show you what we were generally looking at. And that is just down at the area where the 230 would then turn west and convert to 115. Some of the questions I was sent were, what is the need for the line? As a public utility, even a privately owned one, we have an obligation to serve. So we have a customer, Energy Services Management, that is a subsidiary of Pacificorp, that has requested an increase in the ability to send more generation capacity out into our loads down in the Portland area. So because of our obligation to serve and because it's a customer request, that line is something that we have to build for them. We can't not do it, so to speak. Questions were asked about why we're not looking at alternative routes. We've owned this right away, I think, since the 50s or 60s. There has been some minor encroachment and some more significant encroachment into the right of way. And as we move further in design, we're going to have to determine what we can or can't do about any areas that have encroachment in them. The reason that we're going west around the city of Camas, the city of Camas has an ordinance that says all high voltage transmission lines have to be buried if they want to go through the city. The cost for the installation of underground lines at 230 are incredibly high. And so therefore, because we also have a fiduciary obligation to try to find the lowest cost method of construction and achieving the project's requirements, we decided that the best course of action would be to bring a 115 line around the city and obtain new rights of way. We're going to do a lot of road right of way through the roads that parallel on the west side of Camas. So we're avoiding, to the extent we can, any private easements on that new 115 line. There will, of course, be some, but the majority of what we're trying to do is go with state or local government or road rights of way for that 115 kV line because of its lower voltage. That's a summary in a nutshell. If anyone has questions or wants more detailed information, I'll answer what I can. It's very early stages in the project. We are only now just starting to look at the permitting requirements. The in-service date is now 2030. So not a lot's going to happen in the next year or so, but eventually we're going to have to engage with the counties and go through our SEPA permitting and then other local permits.
So I guess we can just ask questions now. One question I had is related to, are you doing anything at the Swift Reservoir to generate additional energy?
I'm not aware. There's nothing to it. So one thing to understand is I can only answer regarding the questions or regarding my project. And there's no aspect of my project that has an increase of generation, like materials or equipment at the Swift Hydro. There may be, I'm not aware of it. My project doesn't include it.
Okay. And have you gone through the FSEC process?
I'm sorry. Oh, FSEC. Yeah, as we understand it, and in discussions with the state, FSEC currently in Washington is a voluntary process. The desire of that process is to help you get through if you think you need it. At this point, we feel that going through the county SEPA process is probably the more expedited fashion to conduct permitting. So we're not going to voluntarily put ourselves in that section.
Okay, let me open up to the rest of the counselors if you have any immediate questions.
Yeah, just follow up to that last thing you said. What permitting process were you envisioning, and what are the interactions with the county council in permitting this?
Well,
Are there
I
any?
don't really understand. I don't know that. I don't know how the county council gets involved per se. What is required is each county is going to have a SEPA checklist, and the county that is most significantly impacted will probably take the lead in the SEPA effort. I assume the county council will be aware of the county's permitting effort. That would be what I would imagine would be the interface, especially on a project that has this much attention. But what we do is we go through county SEPA process with one lead collected, and then any other additional permitting requirements that each county may have. There are, I think, 3 counties that we go through. And I'm not sure which county will be the lead. I'm assuming it will be Clark County, but I'm not sure.
Amber, Kathleen, do you have any more info about that?
The only thing I would say is the permitting process is based on code or federal state regulations. So the staff actually follows that process. There may be some approvals with council. We would have to actually evaluate that when it comes in, but normally council is not involved in day-to-day permitting processes
Okay,
other than establishing codes.
and
we
for the
implement.
audience, the SEPA is a state process, a state environmental review process, correct?
Christine Cook, Chief Civil Deputy. It is a state required process, but depending on which department is working on a matter, and in this case, it would probably be community development, there is a responsible official under SEPA who makes decisions about and determinations about the extent of analysis that's required. So it would be somebody in our ComDev department.
Okay, thanks. And my other question is about existing transmission corridors that could be used or built alongside or doubled up on. What are those possibilities, and what are the capacities of the existing corridors that you know of?
So as far as, so that's been a common question too, is why are we not looking at other routes? What you have to bear in mind is we've had this right of way for many years, and trying to do route studies and obtain additional right of way is incredibly costly. So the intent now is to use our right of ways and follow the path that was planned and has been planned for quite a while. So there's no intent to look at other routes. As far as the ability to co-locate, when you talk about co-locating lines, you are limited in abilities to actually put them on same structures. Lines that go from the same terminal points at the same voltages can't be run on the same structures, because in an event, you would lose both of those, and therefore you lose your redundancy. However, that said, you could parallel other existing lines. If it becomes that the requirement for us is we have to route it a different way, we would look to route it along already constructed linear, impacts to the local landscape. So that's roads, other lines, things like that. So we can put it next to other lines. And we can put them on structures together, but they have to be different circuits.
Okay. And I'm assuming that in the SEPA process, there'll be alternatives, including that potential doubling up on an existing corridor, which I understand you haven't reviewed yet, but there is potential capacity in other routes to consider. So I assume the SEPA process will look at various alternative routes.
I don't know that the SEPA process requires you to consider alternatives. I'm not a SEPA expert. I've only been through it once on one other project. But like, as somebody earlier mentioned, it's codified. We're going to follow the SEPA process or whatever it's required of us.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate that. And I'm sure our community appreciates you being willing to be here as well. I would just like to just ask a general question, and that is there any benefit to Clark County of this project?
Not, there is no, so there are indirect benefits, but no direct benefits. Right now, the power is going to be brought from our facility at Merwin down to our end users in the Portland area. But because we have increased capacities and additional lines, we've already had discussions and heard from Clark County PUD that they would potentially request service off that line, and then we would sell power to them, and then they can serve their customers. So directly, there isn't an impact. Indirectly, there can be.
Thank you. And then I just would like some clarification. From my understanding, I mean, it's not bringing any additional capacity to its end location, which I believe is Troutdale, from my understanding, but it is relocating the direction and or how it gets from point A to point B. Is that accurate?
No, no, it's an increase in capacity. I'm not sure what I said that confused you. Its main purpose is to increase the capacity and the ability to deliver more power down into the Portland load.
So the intent is that more power will be delivered down south through this
Correct.
system, and the existing infrastructure couldn't handle that increase?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. And then I was curious, when you say incredibly high, so in terms of the cost to bury the lines, can you please elaborate on that just a bit?
Sure. 230 lines are generally around $2.5 million a mile to build, permit, and build. And what we're seeing is that the costs go up around 10 times and sometimes more, depending on the terrain and what you have to do. So you're looking at a section of line that I can't remember the distance through the city of Camas. For ease of math, let's say it's 5 miles. So that's, yeah, I should have picked the easier number. It's going to jump from, say, 25 million to 250 million, or, apologize, I'm trying to do math on the fly, never a good idea. But you get the point that generally speaking, the cost per mile are 10 times or more greater.
And would that render the project unfeasible?
It's not that it renders unfeasible. Again, we have a fiduciary obligation. So we're going to have to go to the PUC in all the states we operate for a rate increase. And we're going to have to justify why we didn't consider a different option than undergrounding when other options were there. And although there are opponents to the other options, there would also be opponents to digging in through people's homes in the Camas area. So we would have to justify that, and it would not be something that we could justify.
Okay, thank you for that. Those were kind of my general questions, and I did have a few that were provided to us from citizens that I would appreciate that you could answer if possible. One was there's mention of taxpayer money. Is there any taxpayer funding that is going into this project, or is it all private?
I'm unaware that there's any taxpayer money associated with this project. I've never had a project myself in the company, and I've been in the company for 31 years. I've never had a project where we've ever had taxpayer money that helped us pay for a project.
Great, thank you. And what about eminent domain? Are there any situations under which the utility would be able to exercise eminent domain?
Yes. Well, where we have existing right of way, of course, we don't need to use eminent domain. But if there are other areas where we need to get right of way, or if we cannot find a willing landowner who's willing to sell us the substation property, we have the ability to seek eminent domain through Washington State's process.
Okay, and at this point in time, are you aware of any situations where you plan? I know that you've got a lot more planning to do, but are you aware at this point of any potential instances where that will be needed to be used?
No, I'm not aware of any at this moment. Again, we were going after the substation properties, but then put that on hold. So we haven't gotten to the point where anyone's been made an offer and denied us, and we considered the idea of eminent domain. We'll do everything we can to avoid eminent domain. We negotiate for a long time. The only reason we end up in eminent domain is again because the project's mandatory. It's we have to do it to serve our customers.
Okay, thank you for that. And the last question I had was, and I appreciate, the forethought that this is going to be needed and the purchasing of easement many years ago. And I understand, with utilities, it is very hard to locate these, and it is much better to run it in a place where you already have existing easement rather than trying to forge a new path where there's no current easement and there's current development and things of that nature. But one of the things that I did want to understand is even though that easement already exists, we're one of the things that we're contending through in our comprehensive plan update now is climate change. And I would appreciate, I don't know if you probably don't have it now, but I certainly would appreciate the depth of tree removal that would take place during this project. I don't know if you have any preliminary information on that at this point.
No, no, there's no way. We haven't surveyed the line. I can tell you where there's forested land, for the entire width of the right of way, all of the trees will be removed. But as far as how many acres, what number of board feet, anything like that, I don't have an answer.
Okay, could you please keep us up to date on that if you do get any more information?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then the last thing I would say is that there have been multiple lists, and I know that you have received those questions. Again, I appreciate the transparency and you willing to come forward today and communicate with us. But I hope that you would be willing to commit. And I saw your email that that some of these questions you simply don't have answers yet. But if you could provide maybe a document and email it out to the individuals that we've received emails from, answering as many questions that you do currently have the answer to, and maybe commit to, as you do discover new answers to some of those questions in the future, that you also could relay that information out. Would that be a possibility?
Sure. I would say probably the only question I can answer, someone had asked questions about FEDA, which is Washington State's, I think, renewable energy policy that was passed several years ago. The only answer I have to that is that hydros are considered renewable and very green. So I don't think that increasing capacity from a hydro in any way violates the desired intent of Governor Inslee's FEDA policy. There were many questions of a technical nature that were sent in. The majority of those I'm not in a position to answer. We don't have the design in a place where I can answer structure types, structure heights. I can send you general types of structures you'll see, but I can't send you specifics. And then again, in the effort of transparency, there were a number of requested questions that I cannot answer, that I'll have to recommend that if they're desired, the people who want those answers will have to go to open sources like Oasis to see what's published for public availability. We don't send, a question was asked about load studies and things like that and current loads. We don't offer that out to the public, and you can imagine why. But anything that gets published on Oasis through Pacificorp's website there, that's all public knowledge and available for anyone to take a look at. So some questions I will be able to answer, and some I will never be able to answer for security reasons.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you answering my questions.
Go ahead.
John, thank you. And I did also see the email in which you said there were a lot of questions you weren't able to answer, but I'm curious, any idea on how many properties, because this is a big concern from community members, particularly those along the route where the power lines will be installed, but any idea on how many properties will be impacted?
Unfortunately, I don't have that on me out here where I am. I can send that to you, and I can also send along with that the number that we believe have structures of one type or another that are impacted. The questions that one of the person posed the question of, they were curious as to how many residences versus how many play structures and sheds. It's not that many, less than people think. There are a few, and I can send that to you after I get back into the office. And then I can also send you the list of property owners that are affected. Off the top of my head, I don't know it.
We will strongly appreciate that. And if, in fact, these properties, when they get impacted, because I think it sounds like it's going to happen, one of the concerns that these property owners have is the loss of property value. How does Pacificorp mitigate that?
Well, on existing right-of-ways, there is no mitigation for perceived property loss. There's unfortunately no studies that anyone can really hang their hat on. And if you search the internet, you'll find 6 that say one thing and 6 that say another. So there's no easy way to determine real impact on property loss versus perceived. We understand from the property owner's point of view, it's an impact. There's no way around that. But trying to assign a value, it's not an easy thing to do. It's a very difficult process. In Oregon's condemnation court cases, each party has to hire a specialized appraiser, and both of them go and look at pristine properties, values in the area, then values of properties that have power lines on them, when they were built. And it's a pretty extensive study. And then they voice their opinion and argue in court who's right. So the point I'm trying to make is there's no easy way to say X dollars have been lost or gained. So Pacificorp's policy now, especially on existing right-of-ways, is we don't mitigate for that.
Thank you.
Councillor Belcott, did you have any questions at this time?
I do not, Chair.
Thank you. Just a couple more questions that I have. Fire risk has been mentioned quite a bit, and I think that ties into why people would be interested in having the lines underground. Can you speak to because I know we've seen in California the fires related to power lines. Can you speak to that concern?
Yes. So generally speaking, the high voltage lines are not lines that are liable or found or accused to be liable, or whatever the correct terminology would be, for fire that occurs. It's generally lower distribution lines because the trees and things are closer to them. So for initially the 230 line is going to be much less likely to ever be associated with any sort of a fire risk. Additionally, Pacificorp is investing hundreds of millions of dollars right now into their entire system to harden it and to increase weather watch capability that will allow us to make decisions to de-energize lines in a high risk area due to weather events. So there's a lot of effort Pacificorp is going through in order to ensure that wildfire danger is as minimized as is possible from a new line.
Okay. And so can you talk about where you're at in the process? Because I know your crews have been going out and doing some survey. I imagine you're assessing the easement line itself. Can you talk about where you're at in the process
Sure.
and what may
We're
be
again
ahead?
we're very early in it, and what people have seen is we've sent geotech trucks out to do geotech studies for the geology of each area where the line is going to be built. That's all part of the design process. which is being reinitiated now. So the design's not, the design's currently on hold, but we're reinitiating it. The survey work that's been done has all been something that I've offered to local landowners, because what they want to see is, what does this look like, or what does the easement look like? Where's it going? And so I have voluntarily offered to send surveyors out to people who requested it to say, here's where the easement boundaries are in relation to your property, in relation to your residences. It helps them see in more real time the impact. So we're not actually surveying the easements as a whole yet. However, I have just asked my surveyor for a cost to go ahead and do an entire on the ground survey. Because again, some of the list of questions have asked for things I can't answer. And in an attempt to try to get answers for those people that are asking them, we're going to go ahead and try and get the surveys done this year as opposed to waiting until just before construction. Although generally, we don't do a full survey until just before construction.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, as individual property owners may request to have a survey for what the impact will be on their property, you are providing that?
Yeah, that's correct. And I don't know the number. It's probably been, it's under 10, I think. 10 or so people from other public meetings. There was a public meeting down in Battleground, and I made the offer there, and a few people have reached out and said, hey, I want that. We've gone ahead and done it for them.
Okay, well, they're noticed at this point that that's available. So thank you for that.
Let me,
And
I forgot
yes,
to
go
answer the
ahead.
rest of your question, which is what's going on in the future. So again, right now we're reinitiating the design. We may be going out to do a full survey here this year. The design won't be completed until sometime next year. We will have to begin next year going out to the substation properties to try to obtain those. We'll be reaching out to any private landowners or local landowners or city landowners or the road right away for the 115 kV line. That'll all begin next year. And then also late next year, we'll actually kick off the permitting process and start reaching out to the counties to begin the SEPA effort. So the ultimate construction would be in 2029, completed in 2030.
Okay, thank you. I was just writing down some of those dates. So it sounds like, with the exception of talking to individual property owners or maybe outreach that's done with those substations, that the SEPA process itself is a public process, and that notice would have to go out to folks all along that line when the permitting occurs. I'm just saying this for the benefit of the public to know when you'd have an opportunity to weigh in. And this may be a question for the staff. What is the, when that notice goes out, what is the comment period that people may have to weigh in or raise concerns related to the impact? Offhand, does anyone know?
I don't know that offhand, but we can certainly let you know.
My recollection is it's not a long time. It's not a long time.
No, in the SEPA process, there's mandated dates. But what I've offered and what I'm willing to offer here publicly again, any group that wants me to come talk to them, I'm happy to come talk to you every quarter if you want and give you updates of where we are. I will meet and try to let you guys have the most recent information as often as the public wants. I'm not going to limit my public outreach to SEPA. I'm happy to voluntarily come and meet with whatever group wants to, just like we did at Battleground. If people want an annual one at Battleground, I would only just ask that, some local concerned person set it up. If you want it quarterly in the neighborhood or every 6 months, whatever people want that will help them be aware of what's going on and get the latest information, I'm happy to do. We'll eventually have a website created. Again, we don't have one now for it because there's no information to put on it. That's a frustrating answer for most people, so that's why I'm happy to offer. I will come and meet with whoever wants to, as often as you guys want and within reason. Just let me know.
Great, thank you for that. Chris, did you have a comment?
I did, thank you. Transparency is absolutely what is wanted here, and the more communication, the better. I would like to throw in the caution that if what Pacificorp is offering is something outside the SEPA process, then it's outside the SEPA process. And people who might wish to have input and redress concerning the SEPA process need to be careful that all of their information, comments, input, so forth are given in the SEPA process as well.
Great, thank you for that, because through the SEPA process, if there's opportunities to appeal or, have some redress, that's the process for that to occur. So it's good to have, and John, thank you for putting that offer on the record here for the public to be able to interact with you. But it really is the SEPA process. Tell John everything you want, but include it in the SEPA process if you have further concerns. Any other
Sure.
questions? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to add for the record that I have, just like the community here, have extreme concerns about the transmission route here and the impacts it's going to have on our community, on kids, on just quality of life. And the good news is that the SEPA process requires alternatives. Just like NEPA at the national level, you have to provide alternatives. So I see Jordan out there, he works on policy with us. I would urge us to look at any possible route for us as a council to demand alternatives be analyzed in the SEPA process, because it sounds like there are possibilities there that are not being looked at by Pacificorp and should be through the SEPA process. So if anything we can do as a council to add our voice to make sure that alternatives are reviewed, because once it's an alternative, it's a possibility. So that's all I have to say.
Chris, okay, please refrain from clapping. Chris, you have a comment, please.
Yeah, I understand that an analysis of alternatives is desired by some, maybe many, maybe, I don't know. But be careful in knowing what's going on with the SEPA process, because an alternatives analysis does not automatically happen with SEPA. So certain decisions are necessary before that occurs.
Okay, yeah, so I just want to analyze what those possibilities are and how we can add our voice to try and ensure that there are alternatives in that process. And I know we have a long time to learn what our possibilities are, but I would like us, as if possible, to advocate for those.
Go ahead.
Sure. I also would like to have staff bring us an update on our current code. I'd like to look at that. I don't believe in creating or changing code to avoid or allow one specific project, but this is probably something that hasn't come into our radar for probably decades. And I think it would be worthwhile to review our code regarding transfer lines.
We can certainly bring back information, but most of our code adopts the state standards for the SEPA process.
Okay.
But
And I guess
so
we'll
I
look
don't
at
know
whether
if-
we can increase a
so-
higher standard or
So you
not.
would be looking at potentially changing our code to accommodate council directing that process more specifically and more restrictive than the state and what's required by law.
And of course, council cannot direct staff
They can through
pursuant to the
They can change
charter.
code though.
They can change code as long as that is consistent with any other requirements that might apply.
Okay, well, I'm not looking at change right now, but I think it behooves us to at least understand what the code is currently and what options are available.
For information purposes.
Correct.
Not for direction.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think we have some studying up to do ourselves as a council.
And if I could just share, just ask for clarification, do you want that information presented to you or just sent to you by email? I mean, it's because if we put on a council time, we're, or maybe a 10-minute work session or just an email. I mean, I think it's pretty easy to find that information, but I just want to make sure that we're fulfilling what council's desire is for next step.
Counselor?
I think a presentation would be good because it's another opportunity to have this in front of the public and ability to discuss opportunities to do
I would
future
suggest
actions.
a work session, again, not on council time at this point, but I defer to council on.
I think if we could also review the CPR process, how that works.
That's what it will entail because
Right.
the code
It's all
and the
about
law
CPR.
is about the CPR process and
Great.
what's mandated. So
Okay, I think that'd be helpful.
like a 10-minute work session scheduled. Okay, thank you.
Good, then we can get answers about timelines and all of that.
Yes, the timelines and the regulatory process,
All
obviously not the
included.
timeline for that permit process because that's going to vary based on the
that's-
application
Yeah,
and the
that's
specifics.
outside our
Yes.
our ability to control, but within the CPR process, because I think that's what the public needs to be aware of, how that operates and what that informs. Okay, so I think, John, thank you very much. I have a feeling we'll be talking again in this next couple of years. And you've been very generous with your time. Again, apologies for the delay in getting started, but I don't see any more questions from the council. And so with that, I will close this work session.
And thank you very much.